the Sony A9III, I've been testing that camera, and something interesting happened. The new Canon R1, I just got that, and I've been playing with it, and I was convinced the Sony was going to trash all over it. The reason I was thinking that is because, well, the Sony A9III is pretty damn great. For video, it has a very organic noise, and that noise cleans up really nice in post. But it does have a fair amount of noise, to be fair. And but it's organic. It's like the red. So the red, by default, you get the footage. It shoots in a raw format, obviously, and it is noisy in post. But you clean it up, and it cleans up nice. It retains detail, and you end up with a good image. And I thought that the same was going to be true for the Sony, and sure enough, it is. It's very organic, and it works really great, and it cleans up nice in post. But the Canon, I was certain was not going to be able to hold a candle to that. It was certain it would have the normal, color noise inside the noise pattern, and it would have artifacting. You get those lines and weird things inside the noise pattern. But I'm playing with that camera, and I'm comparing it head to head, and like you all know, the Sony A9 is very impressive. So I can crank that camera up to 12,800 now. That's an important number because for me, it used to be that the most I would go on a camera, if a camera could do 6,400 clean, relatively clean, usable 6,400, I was like, okay, this is perfect. The Sony, I really think can get away with 12,800. Looks pretty good. If you need to push it, you can go higher, but clean, maybe 12,800, maybe 16,000. I have to tell you, that Canon that I was certain would still have the same things that we're used to on a mirrorless camera, the color noise, the weird kind of lines and artifacts that you get in the image. It is remarkably clean at 12,800. And I would say you can actually go a lot higher than that. You can crank this image. You can crank the ISO on the image all the way up to, and I could be mistaken, but if my eyes do not deceive me, I'm able to crank this thing to 32,000 ISO and get an image that, to my eyes, looks about as good as 12,800 on the Sony, which looks as good, honestly, as maybe 3,200 on most cameras. So it is a tremendously flexible ISO range on the Canon. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say the Canon R1 has the most flexible, usable ISO range out of any camera currently available, and definitely out of any camera I've actually used. Nothing else even comes close. And these, to my mind, two sports cameras, right? Two cameras that are designed for speed, one from Canon and one from Sony, both representing the pinnacle of their technology, what they can do. I have to tell you, I was certain that Canon would be soundly defeated by Sony. I thought the Sony offering would be so much better than anything Canon could possibly do, because Sony, they are, one of the biggest manufacturers of camera sensors, largely for smartphones. But the point being is that how could Canon possibly defeat Sony was my thinking. And especially with their new global shutter, a sensor that I myself have been using and love that sensor. So I was certain it would be, well, going back. I mean, I pre-ordered it, but that doesn't mean I have to keep it. I want to try it out because I pre-ordered it. I've been waiting for this camera from Canon for now about 5 years. So I wanted to see how it was going to, well, essentially how it was going to stack up, honestly. And at the end of it, where am I? Where am I? I can tell you where I am. So far, things are not adding up as I thought they would. So whereas I thought that the Canon would have a decided advantage when it came to autofocus, I don't know that that's true. I think that perhaps what is true is that I just haven't mastered the autofocus of the Canon yet, so it might still be better. But honestly, I did see things that I wasn't wild about. I saw micropulsing, which I thought that was long since vanished from the likes of Canon and Sony, and that was relegated to the likes of, I don't know, Fujifilm. But yet I did see on the brand new flagship micropulsing, when I had this in a studio environment, it kept like switching between me and the background ever so slightly, changing the focus. And that was annoying. So it could be user error. There are, if you've ever used any of these Canon cameras, especially this level of Canon camera, you'll know that there is a huge amount of settings that can be done within the menus. So it's possible I've done something wrong. If I can't figure it out on my own, I will call Canon and try and get answers from them. Another thing that I was certain, another area where I was certain that the Canon would be dominant was in, well, actually not much else. I thought that that would be it. I thought it would be autofocus, and it didn't. It let me down in autofocus. Something I didn't really suspect is that it would be a better video machine. So let me explain. The Sony, its image reminds me of many ways of the Red, but in that it is initially noisy, but it can clean up very nicely in post. So you get a organic noise, something that has it's primarily just luminoise. It's it's just a colorless kind of noise that you get. And that kind of noise, in my experience, if it's fine enough, will clean up very easily in post, and you'll still retain detail. And sure enough, that is very much true for the Sony. You'll get a noisy image initially in post. I mean, regardless of what ISO, by the way. If you're at base ISO, it's noisy. Go all the way up to wherever, and it's still going to be noisy. I think the max normal range is about 25,800, or somewhere around about there, 25,600. Don't hold me to that. But anyway, it's about 25,000 is the max range. Is it usable to that? Well, you will notice a loss in detail if you push the A9III to its maximum normal ISO range. It starts to soften the image, to my eyes anyway. It starts to soften the image. You can definitely see it, especially if you look in the shadow area of the image. You're going to notice that it does degrade. To that end, though, if you do the same on the Canon, and I've been having weird things happen on my machine lately with DaVinci Resolve, so maybe I'm missing something, but from the settings I'm setting in the camera, I'm shooting up to 32,000 ISO on the Canon, and I'll tell you what I see. I see a lot of detail. I see a tremendous amount of detail in the Canon image. It doesn't look like 32,000 ISO to my eyes. So I have done a lot of videos like this utilizing the Sony cameras, and my previous Canons, I was able to shoot a fair amount of videos like this utilizing those too. Um, but I've never used this camera in such a way, so I don't know how reliable it's actually going to prove to be as I use it in this capacity. I'm hoping it's great, but time will tell. The app on the Sony is really, really, really good. When I say the Sony app, I'm on about actually a third-party app, which is the Monitor Plus app, which is outstanding. It is such a very good app. The only thing that that app is missing, in my mind, is probably audio levels. It doesn't have audio levels. Seems so basic. It should have them. But other than that, it is a fantastic app. The camera app, by comparisons for the Canon, is garbage. It will connect, but it will lose connection seconds after connecting. Then it will connect again, and you'll kind of be with that kind of thing. So you'll connect, keep connected for a couple minutes, then disconnect. And then if you change anything, it will disconnect, and then it will reconnect. So it's a bunch of just tedium working with that app. But it will allow you to remotely start the camera. So very basic stuff. And you can change settings. So you can change ISO. And by the way, strangely enough, you can see your audio levels on that app, which is nice to have. But it's not in the same league as the DJI Mimo app. It's not in the same league as the Monitor Plus app. The connection is nowhere near as stable. This is probably the most stable connection, is the one for this little DJI. Other than that, I think that they're both really great cameras. They're different. Obviously, the Sony has a much smaller footprint, which is frankly nice. The Canon, of course, has a larger footprint. Sometimes that's nice too. But the battery life on the Canon is far superior. I don't even think that's close. It's a much better battery life. Overheating wise, I've had no problems with the Canon. I've had no problems with the Sony. They're both wonderful cameras in that regard. Um, but you do have that flexibility. So you have a very competent format that is a compressed format on the Canon, but you also have the flexibility that if you want to use RAW, you can. Very early preliminary findings. Stabilization, it's a mixed bag. I think I would give in the dynamic active stave the edge to the Sony. Low light performance is definitely the Canon, hands down. I was certain that the Sony was going to crush it, and it'd be like, okay, I tried it out, it's not as good, I'm sending it back. But now I'm honestly thinking, I tried it out. In a lot of ways, it's better. I have to be honest, in a lot of ways, it's better, and it annoys me because I have a sizable investment in both platforms. I don't currently have a body for the Canon, for all my Canon lenses and accessories. So maybe it makes sense to just add the camera I initially wanted, which was the R1 that they didn't make. I waited over 5 years for this camera. So this is just me rambling, and make of it what you will. But if you're thinking that the Canon is not a big advancement and because it's 24 megapixels, first of all of the Canon 1 series have always been, since all the modern 1 series, I'm not counting like the very early ones, but all of the modern ones have been around 20 megapixels. So I think Canon has settled on that. That is their flagship standard. And it used to be the flagship standard for everyone was 20 megapixels was considered the flagship. So the idea that now the flagship camera is going to be a 50 megapixel or 40 megapixel or somewhere in between is not in keeping with Canon's tradition. For those of you that think that the R5 II is the real flagship, I'm going to tell you now, you are sadly mistaken. The only thing the R5 II has up on the R1 is more pixels. But that said and done, they're not better pixels. And the sensor in this camera, in the R1, I'm going to say, without having tested the C400, which is, of course, essentially a refresh of the R3 sensor, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is the best sensor that Canon has ever made. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to go ahead, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and I'll catch you next time.